In the endless silence of the galaxy there was a throne older than any empire carved from stone that glowed faintly with scars of forgotten wars, and above it floated the alien queen's crown, a relic said to hold power beyond imagination. For centuries the crown had stayed dark, rejecting every warrior, every heir, every noble who dared to stand before it. Kings fell in despair, queens vanished into madness, empires rose and crumbled, yet the crown remained cold and lifeless, whispering too. No one legend said that when the true ruler came, the crown would awaken, and its light would shake the stars, but centuries passed and no one believed. Anymore, only fear and silence wrapped the throne room where the crown drifted in the air like a ghost. One night, a storm of fire burned across the sky as alien ships dragged a line of prisoners from a battlefield at the edge of a dying world. Among them was a human. His face bruised, his wrists chained, his steps heavy with exhaustion. The aliens mocked him, for he was nothing compared to their warriors, a fragile creature from a forgotten planet, but something about him unsettled the guards. He kept his head low, but his eyes glowed with quiet defiance. He had no weapon, no army, no hope. Yet the night he was captured, strange marks began to burn faintly on his arm, marks that no one else could see. He tried to rub them away, but they only grew brighter in the shadows of his prison cell. When the guards saw the faint light, they whispered in fear and dragged him toward the throne room. The court gathered around, laughing cruelly at the idea of a human standing before the sacred crown. They had seen thousands fail, and they expected to watch another humiliation. The prisoner was forced to his knees before the empty throne. The crown hovered above, glowing faintly with its eternal silence. The court shouted orders telling him to bow, but he refused to lower his head. His chains rattled, but his eyes stayed locked on the crown. Then something no one had seen in centuries began to happen. The crown stirred its black surface, pulsing with a dim glow like the heart of a dying star. The laughter stopped, silence spread through the chamber. Warriors stared in disbelief. The prisoner felt heat rising in his chest. The marks on his arm blazed brighter, and the crown moved, slightly tilting as though it were alive. The council screamed that it was a trick, that the human should be executed before disaster struck. But the crown hummed, with a low sound filling the throne room with trembling air. The guards stumbled back, unable to breathe under its pressure. The prisoner rose, slowly, chains dragging against the floor as the crown lifted higher, light spilling from its surface. The glow reflected in his eyes, and for the first time in living memory, the throne was alive. The air burned, the walls shook, the alien court collapsed to their knees, blinded by the glow. Some screamed, some prayed, others begged for mercy as the impossible unfolded before them. The crown did not drift toward a warrior, not toward a noble, not toward the queen's chosen bloodline. It moved toward the human prisoner. The glow wrapped around him like fire, and his chains shattered, falling to the ground. Like broken glass, he gasped for air as visions of forgotten battles and dead worlds flashed in his mind. He saw armies kneeling before the crown, planets burning, galaxies crying out for a ruler. The crown pulsed faster, brighter, stronger, until the walls themselves cracked under its force, and just as it hovered above, its head trembling with fire, the sound stopped. The glow froze, the air turned cold, the crown hung in silence. One breath away from choosing him, one breath away from rewriting history, and every eye in the galaxy seemed to be watching. The throne room stood frozen in disbelief. The light from the crown had faded into a deep hum like the echo of thunder rolling across the galaxy, and yet no one dared to move. The human prisoner stood at the center of it all, his broken chains lying scattered on the floor, his chest rising and falling as if he had been struck by lightning. The alien council watched with terror painted on their faces. For centuries their kind had been rejected, and now the relic that once belonged to their ancient queen had awakened. For a fragile outsider, whispers slithered through the chamber. Some called it an abomination, others called it prophecy. A few fell to their knees, trembling in fear that the legends were true. The council leader stepped forward, his voice shaking as he ordered the guards to seize the human, but the guards hesitated. Their claws twitched, their eyes wide, for the crown had moved again. It hovered directly above the prisoner, flickering like a storm trapped inside metal. Light poured out from its edges, spilling across the throne hall, bathing the walls in blinding brilliance. The guards dropped their weapons, unable to lift a hand against him. The prisoner looked up, his eyes locked on the crown, as if something inside him already knew what was happening. The marks on his arm pulsed faster, glowing like molten fire searing through his skin. He gritted his teeth, trying not to scream, but the pain shot through his veins. Like liquid flame, the council shouted in rage, demanding the crown to be removed, silenced. Destroyed, but the crown did not obey. It drifted closer to him, spinning slowly, as if testing him. Waves of heat rolled out, crashing against the crowd. Warriors staggered back, clutching their chests, while shadows on the walls twisted unnaturally. Some swore they heard voices, not of the living, but of rulers long dead, whispering through the air, calling to him, calling to the one who should not belong. And yet did he stretched out a trembling hand, unsure if it was his will or the crown's will guiding him in the moment. His fingertips grazed the edge of its light. The chamber erupted in a blast of sound, like 1,000 worlds screaming. The glow swallowed him whole. Flames of blue and silver coiled around his body, and for a moment he vanished within the storm. The council panicked. Chaos broke out. Nobles fled. Screaming priests began chanting ancient words, hoping to banish the human before it was too late, yet none of their voices mattered. The crown had chosen its path. When the storm cleared, the prisoner stood unharmed, his chains completely melted away. His eyes shining with a strange brilliance, the crown hovered only inches above his head, spinning furiously, its power unstable. The air trembled, cracks splintered across the marble floor, sending shards into the air. Pillars crumbled under the pressure. The human staggered, barely able to stand as visions clawed into his mind. Entire star systems appeared, burning before his eyes, great fleets clashing in the void. Endless rivers of blood spilled across alien worlds, and then a single voice rose from the chaos. A voice so old and heavy it felt like it was made from the bones of the universe itself. It spoke in a language he did not know, and yet somehow understood. It told him he had been chosen, not because of power, not because of blood, but because he was something the galaxy had forgotten. He was human. He gasped and fell to his knees, clutching his head as the vision ended. Sweat poured down his face. The chamber spun around him, but still the crown did not leave him. The council screamed in fury, some drawing weapons ready to strike before destiny was sealed. But the moment they advanced, the crown reacted. Its light flared like a blade, slashing through the air without touching them, yet tearing walls apart, sending warriors flying backward with screams of terror. No one could reach him. No one could stop what had begun. The prisoner lifted his head slowly, his breath sharp and uneven, and the crown lowered. Closer, glowing brighter. Each second the air became thick, as if the whole throne room was sinking into another world. The hum rose into a piercing cry, echoing beyond the palace, beyond the city, beyond the stars itself. And at that moment, across the galaxy, ancient machines stirred from slumber. Dark fleets hidden in the void turned their eyes toward the signal long-forgotten enemies felt the shiver of the crown awakening after ages of silence, and for the first time since the fall of the alien queen, the galaxy knew the throne was alive once more. The prisoner's body shook as the crown burned above him, its energy growing to wild. To control, the light flickered dangerously, like a star ready to explode, and the last thing the council saw before the room was consumed by a violent burst of brilliance was the human silhouette, kneeling as though he was already a king. The palace lay in ruins, dust hanging thick in the air, cracks crawling like veins across the marble floors, while the glow of the crown pulsed dangerously above the kneeling human prisoner. The council members scrambled from the rubble there once, proud voices trembling in fear. No one dared step closer, yet no one could look away. The impossible had happened. A human had awakened the crown, and now its unstable energy shook the very bones of the throne world. The prisoner gasped for breath. Visions still flooding his mind, he saw flashes of stars being torn apart, fleets burning, and shadows rising from the void. The voice that had spoken to him echoed again in his skull, ancient, heavy, telling him that the awakening was only the beginning. He touched the floor, trying to steady himself, but the marks on his arm burned brighter. Glowing with the same light as the crown, the council leader snarled, his face twisted with hatred. "This cannot be," he shouted. "He is a fraud, a curse. Kill him now, before he destroys us all." but when the guards tried to obey, their weapons froze in their hands. The air around the prisoner was like a storm, crushing every step. They backed away, trembling in terror, unable to strike, their own fear swallowing their loyalty. The council whispered among themselves, panicking. Some demanded his death. Others whispered that perhaps destiny had chosen at last. One elder fell to his knees, declaring that prophecy had been fulfilled, that the new ruler was here. Even if he was human, the argument tore the chamber apart, and yet no one dared touch the prisoner, for the crown hummed louder, as though it could sense their betrayal outside the throne room. The galaxy itself had already begun to stir. The signal of the crown's awakening had shot through the void, carried by ancient frequencies that no living race remembered in distant corners of space. Dark machines powered by forgotten codes blinked to life. Ancient fleets hidden in asteroid graves stirred their engines, and species who had once fought the alien queen felt a chill run through their bones. They knew the crown's call, and they knew what it meant. The war that had ended centuries ago was about to begin again inside the palace. The prisoner felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. He did not understand why the crown had chosen him. He was no warrior, no king, no savior. He was only a survivor, chained and beaten, and yet the relic had given him visions of fire and armies bowing at his feet. The council's fear deepened when priests confirmed what they dreaded. The crown had bound itself to him, severing every chance for another heir to claim it. Only his blood, his spirit, his life could carry its power now, and to break that bond would mean destroying the crown forever. The council leader, furious beyond reason, struck the floor with his staff and declared that if the human lived, their empire would fall into shame. It would become slaves to an outsider. Whispers of rebellion stirred through the hall, but before the council could reach a decision, the ground beneath them shuddered. Alarms wailed across the city. The skies turned red. Enemy warships had entered orbit, an ancient rival species who had been waiting for centuries for this very moment. Their voices thundered across the channels, demanding that the crown be handed over at once, or the city would be reduced to ashes. The council panicked, fear twisting into desperation. They turned to the prisoner, glaring at him with hatred and helplessness. "You brought this curse upon us," they spat. The prisoner barely understood their language, yet he knew the weight of their words. He looked toward the skies where fire streaked down like spears. He had no weapon, no plan, but the crown pulsed brighter in response to the enemy fleet, as if it had been waiting for this challenge. The council rushed to prepare defenses. Warriors armed themselves, yet none could ignore the truth. The invaders had not come for their empire, they had come for the human, for the crown, for the awakening. As the city shook under the first blast, the prisoner felt his knees weaken, wanted to close his eyes to disappear, but the crown burned hotter, filling him with a strength he had never known. He rose slowly, chains no longer holding him, visions guiding his steps, and as the council shouted and the skies rained fire, he realized a terrible truth. The crown had not chosen him to save himself. It had chosen him to lead a war that was already beginning. The sky above the alien city split with fire as enemy warships rained destruction from orbit towers, crumbled, and streets burned while citizens screamed and scattered in panic. The once proud capital of the throne world shook as though the very stars were falling from the heavens inside the shattered palace. The human prisoner, now bound to the crown, felt the weight of destiny pressing harder than his chains ever had. He had been no one a captive, dragged across battlefields, but now every gaze, every hope, and every fear rested on him. The council screamed orders, demanding their fleets rise to fight the invaders, yet their voices cracked with fear, for they knew this enemy was no ordinary rival, was the oldest enemy, the one who had once fought the alien queen herself, and now, after centuries of silence, had returned to claim what the galaxy had forgotten. The crown pulsed above the prisoner like a star ready to explode, its light spilling across the throne hall. Each flicker, matching the beat of his heart, visions surged into his mind. Again, soldiers standing in ranked cities, uniting under one banner, and ships moving like a single tide of fire. He staggered, gripping his head, but deep inside he understood the visions were not madness. They were guidance. The crown was not just power, it was memory. It was leadership, it was war. The council hissed that he should be hidden, locked away before the invaders discovered his role. But the glow betrayed them. Every alien could see the crown's light through the cracks of the ruined palace. The people whispered outside in the streets, hope clashing with fear, for some saw in the human's presence not a curse but the return of destiny. The first blast from orbit struck the outer walls, sending shockwaves through the ground. Stone pillars fell like broken bones, dust choking the air. Soldiers rushed into position, their weapons raised, but morale wavered, their knees shook, their hearts faltered. The invaders' ships loomed to large, their power to overwhelming. The prisoner felt it in his chest, the despair that had already begun to spread, and then the crown spoke in silence. Not with words, but with a surge of heat filling his veins. It pushed him forward, his legs moving against his will, until he stood at the broken gates of the palace. The soldiers turned, staring at him, some sneering, some praying, some simply watching as though waiting for proof of a miracle. His voice cracked at first, but carried across the chaos, the crown's light amplifying his every word. He told them to fight, not for the council, not for the throne, but for survival, for freedom, for the chance that their children would not live under chains. The words burned from his lips, and something impossible happened. The crown flared brighter, and a strange wave swept through the soldiers. Hearts steadying, hands quenching, fear filling lungs with fire. It was not magic, not control, but unity. The crown amplified courage as if every heartbeat began to beat together. Soldiers, who moments before trembled, now roared with defiance, their eyes locking on the enemy ships with renewed fire. The council watched in horror, for the human had done in moments what they had failed for generations. He had made warriors believe again. Outside, the enemy descended, their machines of war tearing through the city streets. Explosions lit the sky. But the defenders surged forward, their voices raised, their blades steady. The prisoner stumbled at the force of it, barely able to stay standing, but the crown held him upright as though it knew he was needed in the storm. Every strike of the defenders seemed sharper, every movement faster. Together they fought like one. The first enemy squad that reached the gates was overwhelmed, not because of numbers, not because of weapons, but because the crown had bound them into unity. Still, the battle was far from victory. More ships broke through, the clouds pouring down endless reinforcements. The ground shook with their landing, as towering war machines emerged, like beasts of metal crushing streets beneath their weight. The prisoner fell to his knees. The vision returned, showing him not only the battle, but something deeper. The crown revealed a memory hidden for centuries. It showed the truth of its creation, forged not by alien hands alone, but by stolen human essence, taken long ago in secret experiments that the galaxy had buried. He saw flashes of Earthmen and women screaming as alien priests, carved into their blood, binding their DNA into the relic. The prisoner realized with horror why no alien heir had ever been chosen. The crown was never made for them. It was always waiting for a human. The knowledge burned in him, twisting his stomach. The council would kill him if they learned it. The enemy would destroy him if they discovered it. If the truth would not stay buried, as another blast tore through the city walls and the crown's voice thundered in his mind, one command clear as the fire falling from the sky: rise, lead, fight. The prisoner gritted his teeth, stood tall, and with the crown blazing above him, stepped forward into the storm as soldiers rallied at his back. The war for the throne had truly begun. The city smoldered under crimson skies, smoke rising like dark rivers as the enemy fleet tightened its grip around the throne world. Streets were littered with fire and shattered stone, while defenders clung desperately to every gate and every wall. Yet no matter how fiercely they fought, the tide of the invaders grew stronger. Towering war machines marched through the ruins, crushing anything in their path, their cannons splitting the ground open with blasts of molten fire above them. The crown still blazed, hovering over the human prisoner, its light piercing the storm as if daring the galaxy to watch. He staggered through the battlefield, soldiers forming a shield around him, not out of orders, but out of something deeper, a pull they did not understand. The crown was binding them, guiding their hearts as though every blade and every breath belonged to one. Will the council followed at a distance, shouting orders that no one listened to anymore. They raged in secret, unable to accept what they saw. Their empire had stood for centuries, yet never had their bloodlines awakened. The crown, now a fragile human dragged from the dirt, had done it in a single night. It was not loyalty that burned in their eyes now, but hatred hidden beneath. Fear the prisoner felt none of it. He could barely hold himself upright every vision. Cut deeper into his mind, flashes of the past, still clawing at him, he saw the experiments again. Earth torn open by alien hands, humans bound in chains their blood. Stolen drop by drop to forge the relic that now floated above him, the truth was unbearable. The crown had never been meant for the alien throne. It had been built with human essence. Twisted into alien power, a relic of slavery now turned into a symbol of rule. He clenched his fists, the rage burning hotter than fear, and for the first time, he understood why the crown had chosen him. It was not chance, not prophecy, not destiny written by alien priests. It was just as something stolen had come. Home, and in that truth there was power. He rose higher, his voice carrying through the chaos, telling the soldiers, not of empires, not of queens, but of freedom. A word most had never spoken yet. When it left his lips, the crown flared so bright that the enemy machines faltered for a heartbeat, and the defenders struck them down with roars like thunder across the burning city. Warriors who once doubted him now fought harder than they had in their lives, blades flashing, claws tearing weapons, firing as if their blood itself had been lit with fire. Still the invaders did not relent. More ships broke through the clouds, raining destruction from above. Their commander's voice thundered across the channels, demanding again that the crown be surrendered. The council turned on him, their whispers venomous, some demanding they betray him, hand him over, and save themselves. But the moment they drew close, the crown hissed with power, its glow forming a barrier of light that pushed them back. It had no loyalty to their throne, only to him, and the choice it had already made. The council's hatred deepened, and in the shadows, they vowed when the battle ended, they would end him too, but the prisoner had no thought for their schemes. His eyes had turned skyward, where new shapes now cut through the smoke ships. Not of alien design, sleek and sharp with familiar lines that struck him with a wave of disbelief. They were human ships, Earth ships, though Earth had long been thought. Destroyed survivors had come at last, their fleet breaking through the enemy blockade. With fire and fury, voices filled his ears. Through broken comes human voices, desperate, calling out his language for the first time in years. He stumbled his throat. Tight tears burning his eyes, the crown pulsed brighter than ever, as if recognizing its true bloodline. The defenders froze, staring as the sky lit with this new arrival. For centuries, they had fought alone. Now they saw humans descending from the stars like ghosts return from the grave. The battle shifted, chaos turning into something far more dangerous, because both armies, alien and human, now aimed their eyes at him, the one who bore the crown, the one the relic had chosen. He felt its light, blazing hotter than fire, pointing not at the battlefield, but at the horizon beyond the stars, to a place hidden for ages. A gateway waiting in silence. The crown showed him a vision of it, a throne not made of stone, but of energy, a world where rulers were tested, where the true bond would be sealed. He fell to his knees, gasping, the weight nearly breaking him. The crown demanded. Ego demanded he follow where it pointed, for only then would its choice be complete. Above him, the skies roared, fire and blood mingling as old enemies clashed and new allies arrived, but all of it was only the beginning. The crown was calling him away from war toward something greater, and as he rose once more, his body trembling under its power, he knew that the truth he carried would not only unite or destroy the throne world, it would decide the fate of the galaxy itself. Battlefield was still burning when the crown's light changed its rhythm. The endless hum that had shaken the throne world shifted into something sharper, a call pulling the human prisoner beyond the ruins of the city, beyond the smoke of war. His body ached, his legs trembled, yet he felt his steps pulled by an unseen force. The soldiers who had fought beside him watched in silence, their eyes filled with awe and fear. Even the human fleet hovering above the skies did not fire, for the crown's glow wrapped around him like a shield. None dared break it. The council followed in rage and disbelief, whispering curses, swearing that once this madness ended, they would cut him down. But he did not hear their voices. His mind was drowning in visions of stars unraveling worlds. Colliding shadows spreading through the galaxy, the crown was no mere relic. It was a key, and now it demanded. To be taken to its true throne, the prisoner marched through shattered streets until the horizon tore open with a light not of sun or fire, but of something hidden in space. Itself, the crown blazed brighter each step, the air quaking as if reality could no longer contain it. A vast gateway rose before them, a colossal ring of stone and energy carved into the fabric of the sky. No record of it existed, no council archive had dared speak its name, yet here it was, waiting as if it had always been. Watching the soldiers gasped, priests fell to their knees, even the council fell silent, unable to deny what stood before them. The crown pulsed once more, and the gateway opened, swallowing the human in its brilliance. The world dissolved around him, and in an instant he stood elsewhere, a realm of light and shadow, a planet that was not a planet, a throne world older than memory. The air shimmered with raw energy, oceans of fire stretched into endless skies, and at the center lay a throne knot, carved from stone or steel, but woven from starlight itself. It waited empty, silent. Powerful, the prisoner stumbled forward, the crown hovering close above his head. As if urging him to take the final step, the council who had followed through the gate hissed with fury. They rushed forward to strike him down, but the throne world itself rejected them. Waves of light struck, their bodies throwing them back as though the very soil refused their blood. They screamed and cursed, yet could not rise. The prisoner realized the truth. This place did not belong to them. It had never belonged to them. It was built for something else, and now it was waiting for him. His chest tightened, his breaths shallow. He was no king, no leader, no savior. He had been a nameless captive, dragged through chains and pain. Yet the crown had chosen him, not because he was strong, but because he was human. Because the relic was born from stolen blood that had been twisted into alien prophecy. Now at last it had found its rightful heir. He stepped toward the throne, every heartbeat echoing like thunder across the void. The crown flared, its brightest light wrapping him in brilliance. His body lifted from the ground as if carried by the stars themselves. The marks on his arms blazed, spreading across his skin like rivers of fire. Pain seared him, yet within it came clarity. The crown did not want a king. It did not want a master. It wanted a guardian, a bridge between species, a voice that could unite what centuries of blood had broken. As he lowered into the throne, the galaxy seemed to shiver. Fleets across the stars felt the pulse machines. Long dead awakened old enemies froze in terror, and allies gasped in hope. The prisoner sat, the crown settling onto his head, its power fusing into his veins. And in that moment he was no longer just human. He was more, his mind filled with endless knowledge, memories of rulers past, wars fought, victories lost, but also something darker. A shadow stirring in the farthest reaches of the void. He felt eyes watching him, vast and ancient, something older than the crown itself, something that had waited for this moment. Just as patiently as the relic had, the soldiers who had followed through the gate shielded their faces from the glow. The council wept with rage, but none could deny it. The throne world had accepted him, the crown had chosen him, and history itself had been rewritten. As silence spread across the realm, the prisoner, now ruler, now guardian, raised his head, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of destiny. This war, he whispered, is not the end. It is the beginning. The crown
oust.
Once more, and beyond the stars, in the cold darkness of the void, a greater enemy awakened, its vast shape-shifting. In the shadows waiting to strike, now that the true heir had risen,